A lot of times when I'm giving a talk around the country, I have to help that community understand that post-disaster, their town really becomes a series of islands, even though they could be in a landlocked state. But their highways get cut, the elevation change. All of a sudden, you can't get from point A to point B the way they normally would think to. Now, you and I, we're island people. You already have this mentality of understanding, oh yeah, if the ferry goes down, we're an island. We are not part of the mainland. So you are already further ahead thinking than a lot of other towns. I'm excited to help you take that to the next level. And there's a specific attitude that I want to make sure that we have this evening. FEMA brought me in to talk to my book about with all of their national training managers. So I'm talking to a room full of military folks and Homeland Security and FBI. There's about 600 people in the audience. And one of my mentors said, by the way, Scott, your normal phrase that you use, that we look at preparedness through a lens of love and not fear, do not say that to a room full of military people. That's not going to go over well in DC. Well, guess what? I did it anyway. And guess what? It went okay. When I said, how many decades have you guys tried using fear as a tactic to get North American citizens to prepare for disasters? And they're like, we've been trying it since day one. Have you tried love yet? And they all looked like deer in the headlights. Like, I can't believe this guy just said the word love to us. By the end of the talk, they were nodding their heads. They were getting it. We had, military folks come up to me afterwards. Yes, I get it. We're going to change how we start talking to the community. It's about community building, love, neighbors taking care of neighbors, not fear tactics. Now, part of why we do that, it's more difficult. I could get up here and scare the pants off of you all, and you might take some short-term actions, but there's two problems with that. One, it's a flash in the pan. You might take a little bit of action, but not all the way. And second, I have just created an Anderson Island that is not enjoyable to live in because now you're scared. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to approach this through love because we want to create a town that even if the earthquake doesn't happen in our lifetime, we have created an island community that's even more enjoyable to live in because we've got the group resilience projects going on. We've got neighbors taking care of neighbors. Does that make sense? Okay, that's important. Okay, this is my executive team. My executive director, Lauren Bast, our program director, Tyler, some guy in the middle. Ann Lesage, she is my emergency manager coordinator at the city of Bainbridge Island. I'm going to highlight differences throughout our talk this evening between our two islands. We incorporated in the mid-90s. No more of this Wild West unincorporated crazy land you guys live in. There's pros and cons that come with that. But I'll talk to you about Ann's position in our timeline of how we flipped our city. And then Chief Jared and Deputy Chief Jeremy from our fire department. So this is us. Who's been to Bainbridge Island? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of you guys. Well, thanks for coming. Next time you come, call us. We'll give you a tour of our disaster hubs. So our island is similar. We are 8 miles approximately north-south. We're about 4 east-west, I think so. We're roughly a little bit larger than Anderson. Big difference though, 24,000 people. So every time I say a number this evening, I just want you to take a 0 off and say that's the Anderson version. Does that make sense? So if I mention some project that we raised $10,000 for to make it happen, I want you to take a 0 off and say, oh, we could do that if we could raise $1,000. We could accomplish that same thing. Okay? All right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the big picture of the 3-way partnership that we have created, and we're going to talk about how you all might get there faster than we did. We'll talk a little bit about how we divide up our roles and responsibilities. After we talk this evening and have a little bit of Q&A, the folks that are in the back of the room, the groups that are in the back of the room, that is just how we started. We started with several different groups, and then what we figured out was it's better together. We started coordinating more and more together, and that's exactly what you're seeing back there. So I encourage you Don't stop by just one booth in the back or one table. Hit all of them. I've got several different deep dives that I thought might be applicable to you all. Some of them are similarities, which you all did with COVID. Open up the bays of the fire department, do drive-throughs, full community effort. We did something similar. We've got other things that, like our new drone team, they call themselves the Drone Rangers. I want you all to take a specific look at that because it's the example of a small team that can have huge impact. So it's very appropriate for Anderson. We'll talk a little bit about marketing strategies and engagement with citizens of the community based off of your initial kickoff meeting attendance levels. I am not worried about that. I think you all are going to do great. And then we're going to talk a lot about replicating our model in your area. We're building a replication kit. My goal is what took us 10 years. If we give you a free replication kit, it'll take you 2. So just a Kickstarter. Like, here's all the best practices, and here's the 9 ways that we messed up so that you don't have to mess up the same way we did. Okay. This is a little bit about us. Here's the math equation. So when I get asked a lot, how and why did you start this? I started it for a few reasons. One of the reasons was I did the math, and the math did not work. So on one hand of the equation, you have 24,000 residents. On the other side of the equation, you only have a handful of what we'll call professional level first responders. So COBE is an acronym you'll see up here that stands for City of Bainbridge Island. Our police department, we have a police department, it sits within the city. Our fire district sits separately. Between our 30 police officers and detectives and our 50 plus fire department folks, at any given time on active duty, there's less than 20 of them total. If the earthquake happens, there's only 20 police officers and firefighters on the island, sometimes less. That doesn't work with the 24,000 residents. That is too big of a number. The answer is to do a judo move and flip that on its head. It's to say, well, how many citizens can we get involved as a force multiplier for fire department, for law enforcement, for the emergency management professionals at our city, so that we can start to fix those numbers. We've been growing very quickly, but I'm going to show you a timeline that shows the growth. I don't want you to look at a number that's like 700 plus and go, oh, well, we can't do that. Yes, you can. And remember, we started out with, I formed an initial core group of madcap rebel rousers of 12 of us in 2011. So it is entirely doable. You all have probably absorbed something like this. We all have friends in other parts of the country that get hit with all kinds of disasters. In the Northwest, we are blessedly free of normal, let's put air quotes around that, normal disasters. For the most part, we don't have tornadoes and floods and things like that. We have them every once in a while. Port Orchard, tornado, that was weird. But when we do have our natural disaster, most scientists say it'll be the largest natural disaster in North American history when we do have that big earthquake that hits our area. So we were going for maybe 4 years or so and doing our grassroots thing, and FEMA, federal government, came out with a doctrine that they called the whole community approach. I was thrilled because this finally described what we were trying to do, to say, we're not going to wait for government to solve things. We're going to solve things. Citizens, residents, we are going to solve this. We're not going to wait for the county or the municipality. We're not going to wait for the state. We're definitely not going to wait for the feds. We're going to solve this ourselves. Thankfully, the federal government came our way and met us halfway there. So they talk about a whole community engagement. This is in essence what we had been creating ourselves. There's a couple things. So this is Ann, our emergency manager at the city, receiving a proclamation from Cole Medina, one of our previous mayors. That proclamation was the very first one where they said, We recognize this crew as an emergency management crew and are making a proclamation, I think it was related to September, being Emergency Management Month. What that proclamation did for us is similar to, for Pierce County, your all's Department of Emergency Management saying, we recognize that Anderson is making serious efforts here, and attaboys, go get them, keep going. It was a big milestone for us to say, oh, the city actually is now supporting our work. It's a huge milestone. That is pretty important. I'm going to talk a lot about our three-way partnership this evening. It's a partnership between a nonprofit, a citizen-driven nonprofit, like you all can do, a fire district, which you all have an awesome version of. I got to tour with them today, and then a municipality. And in your case, you don't actually need that municipality. I will point out, our municipality didn't join us until like 6 or 7 years in to our journey. It was helpful, it was not required. Okay. This is our org chart as of 2024 Q2. You can't see this down here, but it says version 5.4. The way I number my org charts, that means that this is the 54th org chart change. That's a lot of org chart changes. Some of them have been radically different. The main thing I want you to take away from this is, oh my gosh, that's a lot of teams, and this is a lot of teams 13 years later. This is not where Anderson starts. This was grown organically. Organically is a nice way of saying you grow based off of the passions of your volunteers. So if somebody shows up and their passion is ham radio, guess what? We're going to start a ham radio team. If someone shows up and their passion is animal care, guess what? We're going to start an animal care team. Eventually, you get to all of these. Pardon me, but there's a silver Volvo with its lights on, license plate CPL 4035. Please take care of your silver Volvo. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, the other thing I want you to take away from this org chart is even though these are officially city teams, even though these are officially fire district teams, even though these are officially part of the community nonprofit, there's actually a whole lot of horse trading that goes on between these. There's a bunch of citizens, for instance, that sit on our flotilla team. It's underneath the city, but you know what? All the captains are normal people like you and me. They're not city employees, right? It just happens to sit here, in our case, for liability reasons. So a lot of horse trading happens. The only place that we are very, very careful that we keep citizens out of, even though they're trained, we have a number of certifications, is this center column. You all have a volunteer fire department. We don't. We leave a lot of that stuff in the fire column to the professional level folks, and we keep our citizens out into supporting roles. So for instance, CERT, our CERT team, is staffed with folks like you and me, and they serve as a force multiplier for the fire department anytime they get called up. Okay. Lots of different teams. You're gonna look at this and your eyes are gonna kind of glaze over and you go, okay, yeah, that's a lot of teams on the city. Same thing here. Oh, that's what the fire people do. Here's the more interesting one. So this can be replicated on Anderson Island. It does not need to be replicated this year. Remember, it's taken us 13 years to grow these teams. What I do want you all to, I do want to encourage the conversation to happen, particularly this evening afterwards in this group, and then if you all are interested in joining these teams in the back and the core council that's forming around this, to talk about the prioritization. Which of these teams do you want to tackle first and why? Several are already up and going. The Ham Radio Club here is already super strong. I'm very impressed with that. The Map Your Neighborhood team is already up and going. So you already have several of these that are going. There's additional ones that you can look to us, your northern neighbors, as examples of, oh, how did they get from point A to point B? And we'll talk about some of those this evening. Okay, so the main thing I want you to take away from this slide, the volunteers are dispersed among a number of teams, is the growth rate. Pre-pandemic, we were at 250 credentialed volunteers, something like that. And in particular, there was one team that we were really struggling to get traction with, and that was our Medical Reserve Corps. You'll see that abbreviated MRC up here. The reason we couldn't get our Medical Reserve Corps any traction was they're all medical license holders. These are very busy people in life, right? These are doctors and nurses and EMTs. It was hard from a marketing standpoint, from a messaging, to get their attention. And then the pandemic happened. And they were told they couldn't come to work. If you tell medical license holders that they can no longer go to work to help people, they tear their hair out. So they found us. We basically doubled the size of our organization through the pandemic. It was one of the silver linings of that tragedy, is that it was a refocusing of society. And our volunteer rate, which is similar to your volunteer rate, I'm imagining, is literally double the national average. So the national average of, you go to any town in Cleveland or Boston or Texas, and the people volunteer at about a mid-20 something volunteer rate. Our volunteer rate on Bainbridge Island is in the 60s, more than double. I'm going to guess it's probably pretty similar for Anderson. That is your leverage point, that you've got that much level of citizen engagement. Okay, this is the timeline I promised to show you. We started back in 2011. I'd like to point out a few key things. First, we did not form an official 501c3 entity with the IRS for 5 years. Don't be in a hurry to do so. If you want to, you can. You can also just kind of stay this nebulous Anderson Island Preparedness Initiative, and there's nothing wrong with that. We went after, right away, the first things we did is we went after our CERT program. That is a federal program. There's 2 federal programs I'll talk about tonight: Medical Reserve Corps and CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. We went after this one first for a few reasons. It is action-based. So much of the planning that we were doing in 2011 was just that. It was planning. We were sitting around in our cafes, the same version of the one that I had lunch in today, in small groups doing planning, writing down plans, going through what-if scenarios. We hadn't yet got to the point where we were acting. We were actually like, let's put on vests and figure out how to carry that person who is really injured through the forest. And we don't have a stretcher. All we've got is a bed sheet. Or let's look at light search and rescue tactics, so that, because like you all, something happens, you call the sheriff from the mainland. They might come out that evening. They might wait till the next morning. You all might want to act before that, and you can. And a CERT team allows you to do that. We ended up fighting for first a part-time position at the city and then eventually a full-time position at the city. When we secured that, we actually separated from Kitsap County Department of Emergency Management. We did that for a few reasons, but the primary one was so that our emergency manager can go straight to the state. For Anderson, I would encourage you not thinking along those lines, but thinking along the lines of, you have some point people here that Pierce County Department of Emergency Management knows, respects, keeps you in the loop, and has often communication with you, right? Those folks at Pierce DEM have got a big job, and they've got a bunch of little towns that make up Pierce County. What you all want them to think is, man, those Anderson Island people, they have got it going on. They have really got things wrapped up. I'm going to start using them as an example to the rest of Pierce County. Does that make sense? That's your goal with your county emergency management folks, is get them to absolutely love you, that they want to pay attention to what you're doing. One other thing to note. 2021, first 2 paid positions. My executive director and my program director. That is a decade of all volunteer work. You all can do that too. You can do it because you have a similar level of community engagement, you have a similar level of volunteerism, and you all showed up this evening. So don't be worried too quickly about, oh my gosh, we've got to find paid staff to do this. I think wasn't it Margaret Mead said it's amazing what you can do when you've got a small group of motivated people. You don't let money become an issue, a roadblock. You can always get around that. Okay, there's a lot of times that we have to explain to audiences what is it that we do and what is it that we don't do. You all will need to have this same understanding amongst the island, and when you swell to 5,000 people every summer, all those visitors need to understand, here's what we do and what we don't do. Basically, if 911 is available, you do not want folks going, I'm going to call the Anderson Island Emergency Preparedness Initiative for this wildfire. No, we still want them to call 911, right? It's whenever 911 stops working, or it's whenever normal resources get overwhelmed and you are requested to step in, that's when we start to activate. Okay, there is a lot of information on this slide. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make these slides available. I will send them to you all, a PDF of these, so that you can absorb them on your own time. This would be one in particular that it will take you 10 minutes to absorb everything that's going on in here. The main thing is that there's two parts. What's cut off there a little bit up at the top is above the line is all the stuff that we do pre-disaster. It's all the planning things. It's everything that the people at the back of the room want to help you get involved in. What happens under the line is how our teams then are activated. So you can consider this kind of a blueprint. You'll hear us talking about disaster hubs, locations on this island, the farm, what were some of the other ones? The community club. The two places right by the ferry as I was coming up, that was the church and is that the community club? Yeah, the American Legion. There's locations that are going to be natural places that people will want to walk to post-earthquake for natural reasons like I want information, or I just want to get out of this building and I want to walk to an open space. That's built into our DNA. This shows what you could accomplish at those hubs, the types of things you could accomplish at those hubs. And we'll break this down a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so let's do 4 quick deep dives into areas I think Anderson might be particularly interested. So the first is earthquake. We're both islands in the Puget Sound. We will both, to more or less degrees, have to deal with earthquake and tsunami-related issues. Here's how we are approaching it. Notice that we've got a mixture of official folks, in this case police or fire, and then unofficial folks like our flotilla, our hubs, our Child Reunification Center. There is no hierarchy there based off of professional versus volunteer. The volunteers are all trained and credentialed. The hierarchy is based off of the Incident Command System, ICS. It's just a way for everybody to get on the same page and work the same way. Our hubs, which is a core part of what we do. So I'll put it this way. Map Your Neighborhood is our foundational layer of everything that we have built is based off of Map Your Neighborhood. That's a program that is street by street, neighbors agreeing to take care of each other post-disaster. It's that simple, really. We've got flip charts that go with it. I'm guessing, what percentage of your neighborhoods do you think are mapped already? 10%? 15, 20%? Okay. That's outstanding, by the way. We are at 55% after 13 years. So you are already doing really well there. Map Your Neighborhood is a core foundation. On top of Map Your Neighborhood sits disaster hubs. A disaster hub sits in the middle of a group of neighborhoods, and it's where people want to naturally walk to. It serves these types of services. And this isn't unique to us. So in the book, I researched what a bunch of different towns across the United States were doing. We cherry-picked my favorite things from 6 or 7 of them and then put it into something unique that was new. And that's what we called our disaster hub. We don't know of anybody else who's done quite this combination, this extensive of a combination yet, but that's part of why we're doing the replication kit, to help other towns, to give it away for free to help other towns to do this. So for any given hub here, like let's take Fort Ward Community Hall, which is way down south here. Actually, let's not take that because you guys can't see that. You're all going like this. Let's take this one, Battle Point Park. Humongous, wide open space. The only trees that are there are ornamental trees that have been planted by the Parks Department. It's a place that after the earthquake stops shaking and people naturally want to get out of their houses, they are going to walk to open fields. It's just in our DNA. It's a great spot for that. It's also a great spot for streets to show up and say, my street looks fine. All the houses are still standing. Somebody else shows up and says, my street was decimated. We've got nothing left. We all had our preparation stuff, but it's buried under rubble. It'll take days to get to it. The hub at Battle Point Park serves as a matchmaking service. The folks that had the street that was okay, they are going to take in the folks that were on the street that was decimated, because that's what we do. We don't need to wait for a government agency to swoop in and say, don't worry, we'll save things. We can do this as neighbors taking care of neighbors. Because, by the way, there is not a government agency that will swoop in and say, we'll take care of things. So matchmaking is the number one thing for the hubs to walk in there. The other useful thing is information. So ham operators can report into those hubs with their gear, and then they can be talking to the fire chief at the Emergency Operations Center to find out what the heck just happened. How bad did we get hit? What's going on across the island? And get official information flowing both ways. So each of the hubs can report back, here's what's going on in our neck of the woods, in our neighborhoods, and then the EOC can give back to them, here's the big picture of what we're seeing. Make sense? For ours, and for what you all can build towards, is offering limited medical care. If a injury cannot be solved at the street level by neighbors, they can be brought to a neighborhood hub. It can be solved there by the next step level up of medical care. So that could be somebody who goes through the fire department for CPR training, stop the bleed training. You all might be interested in doing a program that we did, which was called Wilderness First Responder. That is, you bring in outside consultants, they train you. It's like an EMT light. So it's like a light version of what happens at the professional level of a firefighter. Still really darn useful information. Not only is it useful there in the hub, where you would be the highest level of medical care, it's really useful once you do get to interact with the professionals. Once you do have a volunteer firefighter show up, they are thrilled because they look out and they go, oh, I've got several trained people here that can now be my assistants that are not clueless. So now it's better together again. We did the same thing for psychological. I already met one of your psychological professionals on my tour today. But just like there's potential for physical injury post-earthquake, there's significant potential for mental health distress. So we treat that basically as equivalent to our psychological first aid team is equivalent in importance as our medical reserve corps is. Does that make sense? So a number of things that can happen at the hub. They don't all need to be offered in year one. Start slow and start building them up, just like we did. And you can decide amongst yourselves what that priority might look like. At a hub, this is a relatively boring slide. At a hub, it can get a little crazy. Once you start to get volunteers involved, this is ICS. This is Incident Command System. This is trained from the federal government on down, actually international governments all the way down. Part of why we use ICS is one, just to make sense of all the craziness. The other part, though, is we create our hub specifically because we want to work ourselves out of a job. So we don't know how many weeks it will take for the National Guard and out-of-region resources to roll in. It will be weeks, not days. But when they do show up, let's say they show up at week 4 or 5, we want them to walk into a hub, look around, and go, we get what you're doing. We will now take over, and you guys can all go take a nap. That's why you want to use the ICS system. Does that make sense? You're setting it up so that you can work yourselves out of a job when out-of-region resources and professionals come in to help. I mentioned this earlier, but hubs work best when they're surrounded by Map Your Neighborhood, strong Map Your Neighborhood installations. That's why that's the foundation. You push on Map Your Neighborhood as hard as you can, and then in a parallel path, you start to create hubs. Okay, we've talked about Map Your Neighborhood a number of times. Who here, show of hands, has already done their Map Your Neighborhood for their street? Okay. Everybody who didn't raise your hand, guess what your homework is? Before you leave, I want you to grab the information on Map Your Neighborhood, and I want you to throw a party. We are big believers in preparedness through parties. It is a doomer of a topic. You might as well have fun with it. So, crack open beer and wine and cheese, invite your friends over, not your friends, invite your neighbors over. That might not necessarily be your friends. What I have heard from audiences around the country is that this is the first time they actually have gotten to know their neighbors. That's some weird North American thing that we do as Americans, where we can live next to somebody for decades and we don't actually really know them. You'll be pleasantly surprised. You know, neighbor 2 doors down is a retired nurse. Guess what? If you're hurt after the earthquake, you don't care that they're retired. You still want them to work on you. And now you know, oh, they're a retired nurse. So part of Map Your Neighborhood is this flip chart that you can get copies of. Usually it's a fire department that will manage this. For us, we do it at the nonprofit side. Part of it, though, that's not included in that is this reunification plan. This we created ourselves. That's a specific one for Bainbridge that you can pull off of our website, and it applies to Anderson as well. The reason is I don't want you to just have I want you to have an off-island place to go, but I don't want it to just be over in Stellicum in that part of town. I want it to be over on the other side, on the peninsula side as well. You do not know where you will be related to home when the earthquake happens, and you need a place where you can hang out for a week before you will be able to get back to your island at a minimum. Let's say that one more time. A week at a minimum before you will be able to get back to your island. Any naysayers on that? Okay. When we first did our planning back in 2011, we were going off of the science data at the time, and we were telling people 3-4 days. Guess what? We are really lucky because UW has a whole bunch of crazy smart seismologists stacked there, and they got really interested, and they got a bunch of grants and improved the technology. So we just got rapidly, over the last decade, more and more accurate data. Now we know that the Puget Sound is going to be a complete mess full of debris for 4, 5, 6 days. That's when the Coast Guard has said, we will not send our boats out. They're big boats, they're big breaker boats, for 4, 5, or 6 days to even do a survey because of the Setch effect, the bathtub effect, the tsunami going back and forth through the Puget Sound. So even if we've got a flotilla, you all will also eventually build a flotilla, we can't activate those flotillas if all they're going to do is go out there, hit debris, and sink, right? So it's going to be a good solid week before you can even think about running boats back and forth. So the importance of that is this emergency reunification plan. Having a place that you can locate yourself for a week that your loved ones know about. That even though they might be here and you are over in the mainland, they know where you are and they know that you are safe. That's one point. The second point is who's going to contact who's going to go to who. Let's say the earthquake happens and everybody in your circle is here on the island. What you don't want to do is end up crossing paths walking to find each other. All it takes is a simple, calm, 20-minute conversation over dinner to say, if you're at work, and I'm not at work, I'm at home, and the earthquake happens, You're going to come home. I'm going to stay home. Otherwise, if I'm going back and I'm walking to your workplace and you're walking home, we're going to cross paths in the forest and we're not going to see each other. That's really frustrating. You can solve that very easily. It's particularly important if you have kiddos. It's particularly important if you have beloved parents and grandparents that you live with you or near you on this island. Just have that plan. Once you have that plan, that goes into your go bag. That goes into your backpack that you keep on hand for emergencies. Does that make sense, the importance of a family reunification plan? Okay. And I'm going to use the word family loosely. That's, if you live right next door to your best friends and they are in essence family, they should be part of that same plan. Okay, who in here has kiddos under the age, that are still in the school system, under the age of 18? Not a lot. You guys skew older like we do. Okay. Who in here has grandbabies that are still in the school system? Okay, a few more hands. You all, this might be something that for Anderson Island, you push way down on the priority list. For Bainbridge Island, in our demographics, it was pretty darn high. We have a lot of folks that commute off island, either over to the city, to Seattle, or over onto the Kitsap Peninsula for work. And the kiddos stay in school on the island. If the earthquake happens, those parents, those guardians are off island. Those kiddos are temporary orphans. So we've got an entire child safety and family reunification team that is dedicated just to figuring out the logistics of that. If that's of interest, you can go to our website, bainbridgeprepares.org/kids, and you'll find all of their resources. That sounds like, though, for your community, you might be able to push that further down on the priority list. Okay, another quick deep dive, drones. Now, the reason I like drones for Anderson is our drone team is a handful of people, some of my favorite geeks on the island. They are the epitome of a force multiplier. Just a few people running a drone makes our police chief and our fire chief so happy because they have an eye in the sky. Let's see, that one for example. Sailboat washed up on the shore. People were still in it, couldn't get out, I don't know why. The boat was not facing the right way. On the land, on the shore, you couldn't see the people that were in distress. The drone operator turned over, parked that drone just on the other side so that the fire chief then had visuals. He could see who he needed to go rescue in that cold water. For a rural town like Anderson, drones can be a lifesaver. They can zip right across. There's all kinds of high-tech stuff like thermal sensors where they can see a warm body in the water when you want to get that warm body out of the water as quick as you can, or in the forest. This is a team, it's similar to HAM, where if you get a handful of technology-minded people together, they can have an absolutely enormous impact. Salud. Okay, COVID response, we had a similar one to you guys. So we put up the high throughput clinics for Kitsap County. We ended up doing it for a couple of other counties as well. We got one of the high school gyms, they gave us the gym every Friday night. We transformed it into a high throughput vaccine clinic. We could do over 1,000 shots a day. And then Sunday night, we untransformed it so that the kids could go to school and use it Monday morning. We did that weekend after weekend after weekend. Similar, I think, to the mentality of you all popping open the bays and pulling out the fire rigs and being able to use that as a drive-through. That's a community-led effort. You all did that. You weren't asked by FEMA to set that up. National Guard didn't call you up and say, please do that. You just did that because you're Anderson Island. That is in essence what we would like to say. That type of community level involvement is possible and is encouraged even when we're not dealing with pandemics. Okay, flotilla. We've approached flotilla with a couple ways that I think Anderson could mimic and be just as successful. One, there is the caveat, the flotilla is not going to be in the water for a week. When you are in the water, Known marshalling points. We do not know what's going to happen to our island homes with the earthquake. Something right now that's low water bank might not be low water bank after the earthquake. Something that is medium water bank right now might be low after the earthquake. Earthquakes are weird. We can't predict them like that. So have more than one known, or more than one set of known marshalling points to train the island on. This also relates to wildfire and wildfire evacuation routes of how do we just need to get everybody off this island as quickly as possible. I was talking with some folks earlier about, we nicknamed ours, Chief Jared Morvac, our fire chief, nicknamed ours the Dunkirk Plan. If anybody has seen that film based off of all the mosquito fleet of English boats going over from England just to get our soldiers off of mainland Europe by hook or by crook, right? It was not well organized, but it was literally we just need to get every soldier off of those beaches. This is similar in reverse. We just need to get everybody off of Andros Island as quickly as possible. We do a couple of different things. One, the team leads created a flag for it so that they could identify as they are doing rounds. You need to know which boat is an Anderson Island boat. We just created nautical flags with the B and the I, the nautical versions of that. You guys could do the same thing with AI. I've heard that you're an island full of computer geeks with artificial intelligence, and you could take advantage of that. I know, I'm sorry. The other thing that we have done a lot is dealing with tides. Same thing that you guys will have to deal with. So the big boats are great. The tenders are even more useful because the big boats aren't terribly useful if you can't get people to and from them. So we end up doing a lot of exercises where we're working with the tenders as well and making people walk through the muck. It's great fun. Okay, a couple more slides here. This is how we talk to our community on a regular basis. It could be mimicked by you all and modified specifically for Anderson Island for your demographics. We do a Prepare in a Year campaign. Now, when I get a lot of questions about my book, which you'll notice I don't talk about in speeches, I talk about the community model. The book is a Trojan horse just to get communities to bring me in to give them a speech on the book where I talk about it for about 3 minutes, and then I spend 60 minutes talking about the organization model that they can replicate. A couple things. Relationships are more important than gear. Gear's important. Relationships are way more important. When you think about gear, think first, do I have my relationships in place? Namely, have I done my Map Your Neighborhood party? Do I know what's going on with my neighbors? Do I have that agreement? There's a financial reason to do that as well. When you start to look at checklists of gear, some of them can be daunting, and some of them you don't need if the group has it. Every household does not need a chainsaw. You need one chainsaw on the street and somebody who knows how to use it without cutting off their kneecaps, right? It would actually be bad if every household had a chainsaw. So relationships are more important than gear, not just for a financial reason, but also for affordability. So related to affordability, we created a Prepare in a Year campaign. Some folks can look at a checklist and just go, yep, I've got the financial resources, I'm going to buy it all this weekend, and I'm going to be done. Well, that's great. The rest of us, we might want to buy a little bit each month and then know that at this time next year, I am prepared. I have knocked off that entire checklist. So that kind of a campaign is useful. We branded ours based off of the federal program, 2 Weeks Ready. We made a Bainbridge version of that. You all could do the same thing. It's very easy just to rebrand it to Anderson. So that's one thing. The checklists themselves are at this link. There are 3-4 different types of checklists. There's a go bag. That's an evacuation bag. That's what you would keep if you need to get off this island because of wildfire. That's got 3 days worth of supplies in it. Think of it as an organized place for your camping gear, right? We also have get home bags. Get home bags, who here works over in the city, over on the mainland side? Okay, not that many, but for you all, keep a get home bag. That is a bag that you keep at work that is, this is what I'm going to do if the earthquake happens and I'm here, and I'm stuck here for a week at least before I can get home. Make sense? In particular, if you are wearing dress shoes or high heels, make sure your get home bag has normal shoes with comfortable heels that you can walk for miles and miles and miles in. There's also a car bag version, a vehicle bag, a bag that you would keep in your vehicle, always a good thing to do. If you are visiting us on Bainbridge Island and the earthquake happens, I'm going to ask you, do you have your vehicle bag with you when you show up at one of our hubs? And then finally, there's the shelter-in-place checklist. That's the big kahuna. It's a ginormous list, and I don't want you to look at that, even look at the list until you have your Map Your Neighborhood meeting first, because a whole bunch of that list is group resilience. Post-earthquake, post-big natural disaster, we are living in groups. That's just what the new normal will look like for several weeks, months. So you might as well get to know that group now. We talked about family reunification. We've talked about Map Your Neighborhood. In particular, look at some of the marketing campaigns that we've done for Map Your Neighborhood and the social media, how we use social media to outreach on that. We have a volunteer system that is a bit onerous right now because it's official, because it goes through the city. You all don't need that. So take a look at our volunteer process system and then radically simplify it. Go back to the system that we had the first 5 years, which is, do you have a passion? Is this of interest to you? We'd love to have you. We'll create a team around that passion. Okay, this is the replication kit. If you want to see what it looks like in action, I've got a version 1.0 that's up on the website. It's mostly a set of these videos that will show you, oh, that's what a hub looks like being set up and run. I can see that in 4 minutes. Now it makes a lot more sense what Scott was talking about. Or, oh, that's what the flotilla looks like. That's pretty cool. I can see how we could replicate that here with our 2 harbors. And then stay tuned. I've got a team that I've just assembled. I'm hoping to push out a beta of the rep kit by the end of Q1 or Q2 of this upcoming year. Would love to have Anderson be part of that. It's free. You would be one of the few true island communities that could give me constructive criticism on what works and doesn't work on that kit before we roll it out to the rest of the West Coast. And finally, a gentle reminder of the attitude that I want you to keep. Again, it is fear works, but only short term. Love and community building works long term. And it makes for a town that's more enjoyable to live in now, even if we don't get hit by a natural disaster anytime soon. So with that, I would like to open it up for some Q&A. Let me do a quick time check. Oh, look at that. Only 1 minute off. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir. Yeah, shoot. Good question, thank you. You will tee me up for, I'll answer that and a bigger question. So our ham radio club is intimately involved. I think it was year 2 or 3, I approached our ham radio club and I said, guys, I really need your help. I need you to be the backbone. I don't want to go create a separate communications team. We all know that comms needs to run on the backbone of ham. Would you guys just consider being that backbone? They stayed a separate club. They stayed a separate 501c3. But in essence, they became part of our crew. And the goal was, look, I asked, what were your pain points? And they said, well, we want younger members. And I was like, I get that. How about you give me all of your deep expertise and an instant team of like 30 or 40 strong at the time, and I will help get the ham message to a whole different demographic. And it's a partnership that has worked very well. Their membership has gone up, and I got an instant team of a bunch of rock-solid volunteers that are set to go report to all the different hubs. Correct. Yep. So if I am the hub manager right here, and I'm standing here and I'm working with you guys, 2 feet here is the ham radio operator, plus an assistant. Correct. And they serve a secondary function of they're doing the ham thing. The reason they have an assistant is they are writing down the official information that's coming in on big sheets of melamine, whiteboards, that then get taken to the outside of the hub so that when people can walk up and go, because they want to know what's going on, we don't necessarily want them inside the hub if they're just there for information, because inside the hub we've got medical stuff going on. We've got little kids that are temporary orphans that we're trying to calm down. We've got psychological first aid happening. So that's the reason why they have an assistant, is to go old school, writing it on big whiteboards for outside.
You've brought together a number of silos in this model. Can you talk about some of the political challenges of getting fiefdoms to come together in the service of your larger love, not fear message, rather than, we don't do that or we don't do that? How did you overcome those barriers?
Yeah, I'll give you positive examples. Are we recording tonight? Is this on video? I think it is. So I'm going to give you positive examples. And then afterwards, I will tell you about the negative ones to avoid. So a few positive examples. Actually, much of our growth has been because when I target somebody to join our crew, if there's an existing entity on the island that already does that or does similar work, I go after that leader. If I get that leader, guess what? I don't just get that one person. I get them. I get their board of directors, their crew. I get their volunteer base. I get their email database. So for instance, Friends of the Farms is our nonprofit that is on the island that supports both our professional farmers and our semi-pro farmers, right? It's a one-stop shop. I go after Heather Berger, the executive director of that, and Becca Hansen, her board chair. And by recruiting those 2 people to be my team leads for our food resilience team, one, I have outsourced it to professionals. They know way more. Even though I'm a permaculture geek, they know way more about dealing with professional level farmers than I do. But I not only got Heather and Becca, I got their board of directors and the Friends of the Farms volunteer crew, all in one fell swoop, right? So we do that anytime we possibly can to grow. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel. So you already have a strong ham club. They are now your new backbone. So basically you give them high fives every time you see them at the general store, and you thank them for what they're doing. You've got the farm here. Oh my gosh, as a permaculture geek, I was so excited about the farm. That becomes your goal of, hey, how much food can we encourage and educate people to grow on their own land, to grow and preserve here, right? Food can be easily solved with a couple clicks on Amazon and buying freeze-dried food, which, by the way, the new freeze-dried food all tastes good, not the stuff from when we were kids that was like cardboard. And it's relatively affordable. So you can solve, I can go put away a month's worth of food with a couple of clicks. But you still want to have the farm involved. You still want to have the growing and the preserving, because to augment that, and because more is always better for that. Yes.
This may sound a little facetious, but when you started 10 years ago, were you a polished public speaker?
Yeah. I was a software evangelist, so I got paid to stand up in front of giant crowds and tell people about software, and do that kind of broad reach marketing type thing. My day job, since leaving high tech, I've started 9 companies. My next one will be my 10th. And a lot of them have public-facing entities. So, but you don't need to have that. It's not a requirement at all. In fact, the replication kit we are building now, there's a founder story, but really what we're figuring out is we are creating, it's a series of founder stories. My Medical Reserve Corps was founded by Dr. David Cowan. He was one doctor. He showed me a spreadsheet that showed $13,000. If you give him $13,000, he can buy that medical supplies and he can take care of the island. And he was a man with a mission, right? Our MRC has a founding story. Each one of our teams, in essence, has a series of founding stories. So if I come back here in 5 years, I might hear a lot about Rick and some of the core crew that's going on right now, but I'm also going to hear background of what was the founding story behind the farm, what was the founding story behind the Ham Radio Club, what was the founding story behind the people who organized the flotilla. So it's really a series of founding stories that it's better together. There's another question. Yes, sir. Where do they go? So if are you talking about for wildfire evacuation or are you talking about for earthquake? Okay. So our flotilla, all right, you guys are going to make fun of me. We have a bridge. I know you think, well, you're not really an island. You've got a bridge. Okay. So we have a bridge on one side that goes out to the peninsula, to Kitsap County and the Olympic Peninsula. Then we've got the ferry that goes to downtown Seattle. Our flotilla is planning to do marshaling runs both sides, to send boats both direction, because we're going to have people both direction. First round of flotilla is emergency personnel only. Second round is emergency gear and supplies. Third round is the rest of the residents. So what we have done is created known marshaling points that we think are going to be appropriate, but we're also trying to train our citizens to just simply recognize the flag, because while we might tell people to go to Discovery Park, the giant park that's in Seattle that points towards Bainbridge, because there's some good beaches there, they might not be there afterwards. So it might be a different pickup point. I'd encourage you all to do the same. Train the citizens on how to recognize an Anderson Island boat instead of just what boat docks at what specific point. Yes, sir. The sick, lame, and lazy people? Tell me more about that. Do you mean if somebody gets seriously injured, what do we do with them? Gotcha. Yeah, so somebody who's injured right now. Yeah. So a similar question that I get a lot is related to medications. So the way our medical system is created, it's just in time everything, right? So somebody could be injured, but it's just temporary, right? But they are injured already when that earthquake happens. How do we continue care for them? How do we handle pharmaceuticals that you have to go buy every week and they'll only sell you a week's worth? We don't have a good answer for that. Yes. Yep. So the question is, you don't have a hospital nor a clinic. We don't either. We used to, and then they went out of business and they left. So the question of accelerating medical care based off of a need, Low-level need might get met out in the neighborhood. Medium-level need might be able to be met at the hub by a wilderness first aid person. But you get something more serious and it needs to go up the chain. For Anderson Island right now, as I understand it, the top of that chain is going to be the fire department, your EMTs and the fire professionals. That's similar to Bainbridge Island. Now, I will tell you, we practice some in the flotilla. We practice like patient transfer. Like how would we put somebody on a stretcher, on a dock, on a tender, on a big boat, go over to Seattle, reverse the process, get them to a hospital. We do practice that. I do not personally believe that will ever get used because the earthquake is going to make the city a complete mess too. There's not going to be an empty hospital bed over there for us to send our folks off island. So it's a problem that we have not solved yet. Maybe Anderson will end up solving it, and then you guys can teach us.
Something like a triage center.
Yes.
Several places on the island, or mass hospital, or something like that.
Yeah, so the hubs, part of their purpose is they'd serve as a field level triage so that they can tag people to understand what level of care do we need to accelerate. For you all, it would probably be transporting that person to the fire station where you've got the highest level of medical care versus what can be met elsewhere.
Another thought came to my mind. All the houses on the island are either people live here full time or they're part time. However, if we have a major disaster and houses are sitting there in heaps of rubble,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know who's living there? If they have kids, they have what pets they have, but how many people live there? How many old people?
Good question.
There should be something from every house, filled out a form of their occupants and family in the house that live there.
You just described the Map Your Neighborhood program. So with Map Your Neighborhood, you go through a flip chart with your neighbors, you fill it out, and you show, this is who lives with me, this is the skills that we have, this is the gear that we have. But the primary thing is this is who lives with us. So then you do have that and visitors. So now you do have that documentations. Definitely the dogs. No, you got to do the cats too. I'm going to get letters from cat people. Question in the back, and then question right there, number one, number two, and down here for 3 and 4. So first in the back. Okay. Yeah, so yes, we've tested portions of it. This system, the whole disaster network hub is big enough now that we've tested a few of these. We have not, but not all of them. Couple reasons. One, if I said that to my team leads, they would just oust me. The level of engagement to even test one is really intense. If you look at the Cascadia Ready videos that I showed you at that last slide that shows us standing up a hub and what it takes, you'll look at that and you'll go, oh yeah, that times 10 is bonkers. That's what's going to happen, but to get my volunteers to do it beforehand is going to be a trick. We do need to do it though, strongly agree. Your second part of that question though have our exercises, whether they're tabletop or real live exercises, cracking open the trailer and getting out all the gear, they have benefited us. The day that our city manager and our emergency manager declared that City Hall was closing for the pandemic and we were transforming it into the Emergency Operations Center, they were able to stand up 200 plus people of our crew. Not all the teams, but about 60%, 70% of the teams. And it was instant. Do you guys remember the early days of the pandemic when PPE was all anybody could talk about? Like, we couldn't find enough for our professionals. That team canvassed the entire island, garnered all the donated PPE out of people's kits, brought it back for our police officers and our firefighters. And it was like instantaneous small army of people that were trained that didn't think a second thought about getting masked up and going out and collecting this for the LEO professionals and the fire professionals. Okay, there was number 2.
I really appreciated your book, especially the part about being a lone ranger and building community, because living alone, you try to figure out, well, how many cases of spam and whiskey can I keep on myself? So my question actually is about your book talks about the infrastructure that county or the government agencies won't particularly come to help us first. That's why we're building resilience.
Yes. So county governments are important. The 2 islands we're on, Anderson and Bainbridge, we probably stress our county people out the most because we're the most difficult parts of each of our counties to reach, right? We're the only island in Kitsap. Aren't you the only island in Pierce? Who else? Okay, well, yeah, they don't count. Yeah, they got a bridge, they don't count. County DEM, County Department of Emergency Management, this is true countrywide, is typically a small group of well-meaning professionals, the emphasis on small group. It's sometimes it's a staff of 1, sometimes it might be 5 or 10 folks, but related to the size of their county, it is daunting, the task that those folks have. They are going to just, almost by definition, be chronically under-resourced. We, as the most difficult parts to get to in those counties, that's where we have to take the responsibility to say, yeah, Pierce does want to get out here eventually and bring you resources. But you already know, I've already told you once, it'll be a week minimum. They're not even allowed in the water, right? The Coast Guard will not let them in the water. 2, you can count on it being even longer because even within Pierce, it's going to be the most difficult to get to the island towns. So that's why in my mind, 2 weeks ready with FEMA is a bare minimum for the rest of the country. Doesn't apply to us. It just simply doesn't apply to us. Think 4 weeks. Think 6 weeks as you're financially able. Think 8 weeks if you want to have charity in your life, to be able to bring in the neighbors. That type of group thinking. And again, it doesn't need to be, I've got to go drop a whole bunch of cash all at once. This can be small. This is like the savings account, right? This is, you build this up over quite a long time, and it then becomes quite significant in the end. Back to you in just a second. We had 3 and 4 here. Yes.
One of my questions is, you mentioned that if there is a tsunami, that there's a bathtub effect.
Yes.
And small boats even would not want to be out of the water. I wanted you to maybe repeat that.
Yes.
Because I think in the state of emergency, a lot of people panic and are going to want to try to get out there and cause more havoc.
So the question was, the comment was, in an earthquake, because of the Puget Sound, not all earthquakes do this, we're going to have a weird tsunami, and we're going to have this Setch effect, this bathtub effect. Do you remember, anybody have little kids who you leave them alone in the bathtub, and that was a mistake, because somehow all the water's out of the bathtub? It's that. So the comment was, how do we keep people, particularly smaller craft, from going out in that and making it worse? The good news is it's going to happen so fast, so quickly, that even a panicked person that's relatively close to their boat, they will not be able to get out. There's some really good computer simulations on the UW website that show, they've got little squares that represent boats. And then they show what happens. You got a whole set of them in your harbor. It shows what happens, and it shows the speed. And it is daunting how crazy fast it happens. So I'm not super worried about people freaking out, jumping in their boats and getting out in the middle of the Puget Sound, thinking they can somehow ride it out. There just simply won't be the time for them to get from where they are to their boat. Was there another question here? Yes. Okay, very good. Question here, sir. Yeah, predictive models, yeah. If you're a technology geek like I am, it's fascinating from an engineering standpoint, and from the science it is too. I think the two leading spots are our backyard, the brainiacs at UW, and then the folks in Japan. There's a lot of tech transfer happening. They have it to the point now where there are now elevators that have sensors that will automatically go to a level and open because they know an earthquake is coming. Super cool, right? That might be 10 to 15 seconds advance notice, but that's saving of lives, that technology exists. What we don't yet have is the multiple minutes to hours, where you could say, I know it's coming, I got 20 minutes, so I'm going to batten down the hatches, or I'm going to call my loved ones on the family text thread to find out where everybody is. We don't yet have that, but I am a firm believer in technology as a saving grace, and we are getting better and better. In our lifetime, I think we'll still see amazing improvements in that, more and more advanced notice. Okay. Other questions, or are we about wrapped up? Yes, sir. So the question was, what kind of height are we talking about with tsunami? I have not looked at the wave that's supposed to hit Anderson, but we did talk about that earlier. The two couples that I was eating dinner with had looked at the science recently. What is it? Is it Dana Point? What is say it again? Dash Point, thank you. Again, look on the UW modeling, but Dash Point, I think, is going to save Anderson Island a lot of hurt. If it hits that and it gets dispersed, then you don't have a big wave. For us personally, it radically changed it. We went from the previous modeling from 10 years ago was like 3 to 12 feet, 3 to 15 feet, and now we're dealing with 35 foot. It was a game changer that I don't think is going to be the same for you all. Yes, sir.
Most tsunamis, when they start out in the open water, you can sail over the top of them.
Yes.
Go under your boat, you won't even know it's there.
Yeah.
Until it comes close to shore. The average tsunami when it hits the ocean, it hits the shore, is in the range of 10 to 40 feet.
Correct. Those are different. The oceanside ones are different than what we're talking about specifically for the Puget Sound. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. If the water ever goes away, you run the opposite direction. Yeah. So let's hear a bit about what's going on with our mapping efforts.
Yeah, so there's a committee here on the island that's working on a lot of different areas. I'm Kathy Nussbaum, and I'm on one of the people on the mapping committee. So let me tell you what we've done so far on our island. We have divided the island into 7 zones. There's a zone map right next to Rick Anderson on the exit doors over there. So if you're not sure which zone you live in, please check that out. We are going to, within those zones, we have a zone leader for each of those zones. We're missing one zone leader in zone 7, which is... We have the leader? We have a leader for all the zones. So the zone leaders are going to map the neighborhoods. They're going to break up all the neighborhoods into groups of 15 to 20 houses. And so then we're going to need a coordinator for each little neighborhood of 15 to 20 houses. So those will be your neighbors. So once we have those people will go to their neighbors, get all that information that he talked about, names, emails, number of people in the house, pets, all that. And we'll have an instant email list then. An email comes from the fire department, goes to the zone leaders. Zone leaders send it to all their neighborhood coordinators, and neighborhood coordinators send it to to all the people in their neighborhood. And quickly we could get information around the island. So tonight, what we'd like for all of you, if any of you are willing to help in any way, whether it's communication or maybe you're really techie and you'd love to be on a tech team of some kind, maybe you're a medical person that's retired, you know a lot of skills, we're going to set up some zone tables. Okay, so first I'd like the ham radio people to be over here on the stage. If you're interested, there's lots of ham radio people on our island. If you're interested in learning more about how you can help them, please come up here on this side. If you're interested in helping the fire department, if you're interested in being a volunteer fire on the Department of Fire, please come over here. Scott will be, is that okay if you're down here? So if you want to talk to Scott a little bit more. Zone 1 and 2 are in the library. So if you live in Zone 1 or 2, you can go to those tables and see who else is interested in helping. And maybe you can even help decide where should the lines be in our zone for the neighborhoods, because that's something that hasn't been done in all the zones. Zones 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are in the back at tables back there. So when we're finished here, please find your zone, come back, and you can tell us at the zone tables what kind of things you're interested in helping with in this project. Okay, any questions about that? All right, sounds like we're dismissed.